For 4 years, my daughter-in-law Brittany looked me in the eye and told me my son was a hero serving his country overseas on a classified contract. I believed her. I believed every word because I wanted to be proud. I wanted to believe my son Nash was doing something important. Then one Tuesday morning at the farmer's market, a delivery driver with shaking hands shoved a cardboard box into my chest. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost and whispered 5 words that shattered my reality. "Are you Nash's father?" Then he ran. I stood there holding that package, and when I finally opened it alone in a public restroom, what I found inside didn't just break my heart, it made my blood boil. It made me realize that the woman living in my house, eating my food, and spending my retirement wasn't protecting my son. She was erasing him. My name is Jackson O'Connor. I am 72 years old, and this is how I took my life back. Before I continue this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight for your family against someone who only saw dollar signs. The conflict didn't start with the package. It started in the kitchen I built with my own 2 hands 30 years ago. It was 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, the only time the house felt like mine anymore. I was brewing coffee the way I like it, strong and black, while the morning light hit the granite countertops I had installed myself. I remembered the day I laid that stone. Nash was 10 years old, sitting on the floor playing with his toy trucks while I leveled the cabinets. Now the silence of the house felt heavy. I heard the click of heels on the hardwood stairs. Brittany. My stomach tightened. It is a pathetic thing for a 72-year-old man to be afraid of a woman half his age, but Brittany had a way of sucking the oxygen out of a room. She walked into the kitchen wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. She didn't say good morning. She never did. Instead, she stopped at the doorway and looked down at my work boots, which I had left neatly by the back door. They were old boots, scuffed and worn from 40 years of construction work. With a look of pure disgust, she kicked them. One boot slid across the floor and hit the wall with a thud. Jackson. How many times do I have to tell you? She didn't call me Dad or Jack or Pops. Just Jackson, like I was a delinquent employee. I lowered my coffee mug and looked at her. What is it, Brittany? She walked over to the kitchen island and slammed a stack of envelopes down on the granite. The sound echoed in the empty kitchen. The electric bill is up 15% this month. She tapped a manicured nail on the paper. 15%, Jackson. Are you running a sauna in the basement? You need to stop taking those long hot showers. Water and electricity cost money. I looked at the bill. It was summer in Arizona. Of course the bill was up. The air conditioning was running non-stop because she liked the house kept at a frigid 68 degrees. I take 1 shower a day, Brittany. 5 minutes. She let out a sharp, cruel laugh. Well, cut it down to 3. Nash sends that money home for investments, for our future, not to support an old man who cannot pay his own way. I felt the heat rise in my neck. My hands gripped the warm ceramic mug. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that this house was paid for by my sweat, that the reason we didn't have a mortgage was because I broke my back for 3 decades. But I bit my tongue. I had to. Because 4 years ago, when Nash got that big contract in Dubai, he sat me down at this very table. He had said, "Dad, I am going to be gone a long time. The tax implications for this job are complicated. If we transfer the deed to me, I can claim head of household and save us thousands. You trust me, do not you, Pops?" I trusted him. He was my boy, my only family since my wife Sarah passed. So I signed. I signed the deed to the house I built. I signed over control, and the moment Nash got on that plane, Brittany changed. She went from the sweet daughter-in-law to the warden of my own home. Brittany. I pay for my own groceries. I pay for my own gas. My pension covers my needs. She leaned across the island, her eyes cold and hard. Your pension, implies she scoffed. Your pension would not rent a cardboard box in this neighborhood. You are living here out of the goodness of my heart, Jackson, because Nash asked me to look after you. But my patience has limits. She turned away and opened the fridge, grabbing a bottle of imported sparkling water. By the way, make yourself scarce tonight. I am hosting the launch party for my new skincare line. I do not want you shuffling around in your old flannel shirts, embarrassing me in front of my investors. I stared at her back. Investors. That was what she called her friends who she scammed into buying her multi-level marketing junk. Am I allowed to be in my room? No, she said, popping the cap off the water. People will be using the guest bathroom downstairs. I do not want you in the way. Go to the library. Go to the park. Just do not be here from 5 until midnight. Midnight. She was kicking me out of my own house for 7 hours. Brittany, I am 72. You want me to wander the streets until midnight. She turned around and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile full of teeth. You are a tough guy, aren't you, Jackson? You built skyscrapers, didn't you? I am sure you can figure out how to occupy yourself for a few hours. Just remember who puts a roof over your head. I looked down at my coffee. It had gone cold. The humiliation burned in my chest like acid. I wanted to fight back, but I had no leverage. The house was in Nash's name. If I made her angry, she could cut me off from him. She controlled the communication. Nash was in a high-security zone working for a private defense contractor. Or so I was told. He could not receive calls. He could only call out on a secure satellite line, and those calls always came to Brittany's phone. That thought gave me a sudden, desperate idea. Fine, I said quietly. I will leave. I will stay out of your way. But I want to talk to Nash. Brittany froze. She lowered the water bottle slowly. We have been over this, Jackson. The satellite uplink is spotty. He is on a mission. He is busy. It has been 3 months, Brittany. 3 months since I heard my son's voice. If you want me to disappear tonight, let me talk to him. Just for a minute. Please. I hated the begging in my voice. I hated that I had to barter for contact with my own child. But I needed to hear him. I needed to know he was okay. Sometimes late at night, I had this gnawing fear that something was wrong. But Brittany always had an excuse. The time zones, the security clearance, the bad signal. She sighed as if I was asking for the moon. She pulled her phone from her robe pocket. She tapped the screen for a moment, her brow furrowed. I will try. But if the connection drops, do not blame me. And do not stress him out, Jackson. Do not complain about the bills or the house. He is dealing with high-pressure situations. He does not need to worry about his father being difficult. I nodded quickly. I promise. Just let me hear him. She held the phone up, but she didn't hand it to me. She put it on speaker and kept her hand firmly around the case like she was afraid I would snatch it and run. She dialed. It rang once, twice. Then a series of clicks and static. A voice came through the speaker. It sounded distant, mechanical, almost like it was being filtered through a tin can. Hello? My heart leaped. Nash. Nash. It is your father, I said, leaning over the island, my voice trembling. Can you hear me, son? There was a pause, a long static-filled silence. Father, the voice said. I frowned slightly. Father. Nash had never called me father in his life. Since he was knee-high, he called me Pops or Old Man or Jack when he was teasing. Father sounded formal, stiff. Nash, it is Pops. How are you doing, son? We miss you. When are you coming home? Another pause. The static hissed. I am good. The work is hard. Dubai is hot. You need to listen to Brittany. She knows best. Do not cause trouble. I squinted at the phone. The cadence was off. Nash was a fast talker full of energy and jokes. This voice sounded tired, flat, rehearsed. Nash, are you okay? You sound different. Brittany pulled the phone back slightly, her eyes narrowing at me. Signal is bad. Dad, just do what Brittany says. I have to go. Security. Breach. Love you. The line went dead. Brittany tapped the screen and slid the phone back into her pocket immediately. See? He is fine. He is just stressed. Now you have your call. Hold up your end of the bargain. I want you out of here by 4:30 so the caterers can set up. I stood there gripping the edge of the granite island. The conversation had lasted less than 30 seconds. It should have relieved me, but instead it left a cold, heavy stone in my stomach. Why did he call me father? I asked quietly. Brittany rolled her eyes. He has matured, Jackson. He is working with international diplomats and generals. He is not a child anymore. Maybe you should grow up too. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, her heels clicking on the floor, leaving me alone with the silence. I washed my mug and put it away in the cupboard. My hands were shaking. Not from age, but from a mixture of rage and fear. Something was wrong. I knew my son. I knew the way he breathed, the way he paused, the way he laughed. That voice on the phone had his pitch, but it didn't have his soul. But what could I do? I was a 72-year-old retired contractor with a bad knee and a bank account that was slowly draining away to pay for gas and food, while my daughter-in-law lived like a queen. I had no proof, just a gut feeling that had been screaming at me for 4 years. I spent the rest of the morning trying to stay invisible. I went down to the basement, which was the only place in the house Brittany hadn't renovated into a white, sterile showroom. It still smelled like sawdust and old tools down there. I sat in my old recliner, the one she had banned from the living room, and stared at a photo of Nash and me from a fishing trip 10 years ago. He was smiling, holding up a bass, his arm around my shoulder. That was the boy I knew, not the robotic voice on the phone telling me to obey his wife. By noon, the house was a hive of activity. Florists arrived with massive arrangements of white lilies. A catering crew started bringing in trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres. Brittany was barking orders at everyone, treating the staff with the same disdain she showed me. I tried to go upstairs to make a sandwich around 1 o'clock. Brittany intercepted me in the hallway. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "I am hungry, Brittany. I live here. Grab an apple and go back downstairs. The cleaners are doing the floors. I do not want your footprints everywhere." I looked at her. She was wearing a face mask and had her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked ridiculous, but she wielded power like a weapon. "I am leaving," I said. "I will go to the market. I won't bother you." "Good. Make sure you stay gone until the party is over." "Do not come back before midnight, Jackson. I mean it. If you embarrass me in front of the investors, I will tell Nash. And next time there won't be a phone call." The threat hung in the air. She knew that was the only leverage that mattered. She knew I would sleep on a park bench if it meant keeping that line to my son open. I went to the coat rack and grabbed my old denim jacket. I put on my cap. I walked out the front door, the door I had hung myself, sanding the frame until it was perfect, and I didn't look back. I drove my old Ford truck to the farmer's market on the other side of town. It was a place I liked to go to kill time. It was loud and chaotic and full of real people who worked with their hands. It reminded me of the life I used to have before I became a guest in my own home. I parked the truck and wandered through the stalls. The sun was hot on my neck. I bought a bag of apples because they were cheap, and I could eat them for dinner. I looked at the honey stands, the vegetable crates, the handmade soaps. I was trying to distract myself, trying to stop the voice in my head that kept asking, "Why did he say father?" I was standing near a stall selling organic jams, squeezing a jar of strawberry preserves I couldn't afford, when a beat-up white delivery van screeched to a halt near the curb. It wasn't a designated loading zone. The engine sputtered and died with a loud cough. I watched idly. A young man jumped out of the driver's side. He looked disheveled. His uniform shirt was untucked, and he had dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in a week. He was scanning the crowd frantically. His eyes were darting from person to person. He looked familiar. I squinted, adjusting my glasses. He looked like Leo, a kid Nash used to play baseball with in high school. Leo had been the pitcher, Nash the catcher. They had been a battery, a team, but I hadn't seen Leo in 15 years. Then he saw me. His eyes locked onto mine, and I saw his face go pale. He froze for a second, then he started moving toward me. He wasn't walking, he was rushing, pushing past a woman with a stroller, ignoring her angry shout. He was clutching a shoebox wrapped in brown packing tape against his chest. I took a step back. The intensity in his eyes was scaring me. "Mr. O'Connor." He gasped, stopping 2 feet in front of me. He was out of breath. He smelled like stale coffee and fear. "Leo, is that you?" I asked. He looked over his shoulder, scanning the parking lot, as if he expected to be followed. Then he looked back at me, his eyes wide and watery. "I thought you were dead," he whispered. "Excuse me," I said, confused. "Brittany, she told everyone. She told everyone you died in a car accident 4 years ago, right after Nash left." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The noise of the market faded into a dull roar. "What are you talking about, Leo?" "I am standing right here." "She told us you were dead," Leo said, his voice shaking. "She told the whole town. She said you had a heart attack behind the wheel. There was a memorial service, Mr. O'Connor, but nobody was invited. She said it was private." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Dead. She had told people I was dead. That explained why my old friends had stopped calling. That explained why the Christmas cards had stopped coming. She had erased me. "Leo, why?" He cut me off, shoving the taped-up shoebox into my hands. It was heavy. He looked terrified. "I work for a medical courier service now. This wasn't supposed to get out." But I saw the name on the manifest. I saw the return address. Willow Creek, Mr. O'Connor. "Do you know what that place is?" I shook my head, numbly clutching the box. "It is a state facility," Leo hissed, leaning in close. "A dumping ground. For people with no money and no family. I stole this. If my boss finds out, I am dead. But when I saw the name, I had to bring it to you." "What name, Leo? Nash?" My knees almost buckled. Nash. Nash was in Dubai. Nash was making 6 figures protecting diplomats. "He is not in Dubai," Leo said, tears spilling out of his eyes now. "He never was. Just open it. But do not let her see it. Do not let that witch know you have it." Leo turned and ran back to his van. He jumped in, fired the engine, and peeled away, leaving me standing in the middle of the market, holding a box that felt like it contained a poem. I stood there for a long time. People flowed around me. The sun beat down. But I felt cold. Freezing cold. Dead. She told people I was dead. I looked down at the box. It was taped shut with layers of duct tape. There was a label on the side scrawled in black marker. "Patient 394. Transfer pending." I couldn't open it here. I couldn't let anyone see. I walked back to my truck, moving like a zombie. I climbed in and locked the doors. I drove. I didn't go back to the house. I couldn't go back there yet. I drove to a rest stop on the edge of the highway, a place with dirty bathrooms and vending machines. I parked in the furthest spot away from the truckers and the travelers. I put the box on the passenger seat. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely grip my pocket knife. I cut the tape. 1 slice. 2 slices. I opened the lid. Inside, there was a tablet, an old cracked iPad. Beneath it was a stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band, and at the bottom, a thick file of bank statements. I picked up the letters first. They were addressed to me. Jackson O'Connor. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, scrawled in pencil. Dear Pops, I don't know why you don't answer. Brittany says you are angry. She says you don't want to see me after the accident. Please come. It hurts. I can't walk. The nurses are mean. Please, Pops, come get me. The date on the letter was 3 years ago. The accident. I dropped the letter. I picked up the tablet. It had a piece of tape on it that said, "Play me." I pressed the power button. The battery was low, but it turned on. There was one video file saved on the desktop. I tapped it. The screen flickered. A face appeared. It was Nash. But it wasn't the Nash from the fishing photo. This man was skeletal. His eyes were sunken. His head was shaved, and there was a jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw. He was sitting in a wheelchair in a room with peeling paint and gray cinder block walls. He was wearing a hospital gown that looked dirty. He looked into the camera. He tried to speak, but his mouth drooped on one side. He made a sound, a guttural frustration. Then he lifted a small whiteboard with his good hand. He wrote on it with a marker. "Help me." He erased it. He wrote again. She lied. He erased it. Trapped. Then he tried to speak again. He forced the words out, slurring them heavily, struggling with every syllable. Pops. Not. Dubai. Fell. Off. Scaffolding. Brittany. Signed. Papers. Said. You. Died. Put. Me. Here. He started to cry. It was a silent, horrible weeping. Stole everything. House. Money. Said, I am vegetable. The video cut out. I sat in my truck in the silence of the rest stop. I looked at the black screen of the tablet. I looked at the letters that had never been mailed. I looked at the bank statements that showed monthly withdrawals of $5,000 from Nash's Disability Trust Fund, transferred directly to an account named B. O'Connor, Luxury Holdings. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something inside me snap. It was the part of me that had been polite. The part of me that had been the nice old man, the guest, the burden. It broke and fell away. She had told him I was dead. She had told me he was a hero. She had taken my son, my strong, brilliant boy, who had been injured building something just like his father, and she had thrown him into a hole to rot so she could buy face cream and host parties in my house. She thought I was a senile old fool. She thought I was a dog she could kick and lock in the basement. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I saw the wrinkles. I saw the gray hair. But for the first time in 4 years, I saw something else. I saw the man who had built foundations out of concrete and steel. I saw the man who had raised a son alone. I started the truck. I wasn't going back to the house to sleep in the basement. I wasn't going to wait until midnight. I checked the address on the letters. Willow Creek Rehabilitation Center. It was 200 miles away, 4 hours. I put the truck in gear. Brittany wanted a party. She wanted to show off her life to her investors. Well, I was going to give her a show. But first I had to go get my boy. I pulled out onto the highway and pressed the accelerator to the floor. The old Ford roared. The adjustment had begun, and it wasn't going to be silent for long. I drove my truck in circles for 20 minutes before I finally pulled into the gravel lot of the farmer's market. I was not looking for a parking spot. I was looking for courage. I was looking for a reason not to turn around and drive right back to the prison my own home had become. The air conditioning in my old Ford had died 3 summers ago, and the Arizona heat was already baking the cab, turning the air thick and heavy. Sweat trickled down my back, soaking into my shirt. But I did not roll down the windows. I felt exposed. I felt like everyone in this town could see the shame radiating off me like heat waves off the asphalt. When I finally killed the engine, the silence in the cab was deafening. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My hands were rough, calloused maps of a lifetime of hard labor. These hands had poured foundations for half the schools in this county. They had framed the houses that the wealthy investors Brittany was trying to impress now lived in. Now those same hands were counting out quarters from the cup holder just to buy a bag of bruised apples. I stepped out of the truck, and the noise of the market hit me. It was a chaotic symphony of haggling voices, laughter, and the low thrum of a bluegrass band playing near the entrance. In the old days, I would have walked through these stalls with my head high, shaking hands, with the vendors asking about their families, buying fresh steaks and honey for Sunday breakfast. Today, I pulled my cap down low over my eyes. I was a ghost haunting the edges of a life I used to own. I walked past the artisan cheese stand, where the smell of aged cheddar made my stomach growl. I ignored it. I walked past the bakery, with its trays of cinnamon rolls glistening with icing. I kept my eyes on the ground, watching my own work boots kick up little clouds of dust. I was heading for the back corner, the section where the farmers sold the produce that wasn't pretty enough for the tourists. The seconds, the bruised fruit, the vegetables that were too small or too twisted. That was where I belonged now. I stopped at a stall run by an old man named Silas. We had known each other for 30 years. I had built his barn after a storm took it down in '98. He looked up as I approached, and his smile faltered for just a second before he pasted it back on. That was the worst part. The pity. The way people looked at me like I was a tragic story they didn't want to read. "Morning, Jack," Silas said, wiping his hands on his apron. "Haven't seen you in a while." "Been busy," I lied. My voice sounded rusty. "Just needed some apples, Silas. The ones for baking." He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Take what you need, Jack." "On the house today." My pride flared up hot and sharp in my chest. I didn't want charity. I didn't want handouts. I wanted my dignity. "I am paying, Silas," I said, my voice harder than I intended. I put the quarters on the wooden table. They clinked loud and pathetic against the wood. "Just weigh them out." He hesitated, then nodded slowly, bagging up a dozen small red apples. He handed them to me, and his hand lingered on the bag for a moment. "You hear from Nash lately?" he asked quietly. The question was a physical blow. It always was. "He is good," I said, the automatic lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "Busy. Dubai is booming. He is working big contracts." Silas nodded, but his eyes were sad. "Right. Big contracts. You tell him we said hello." I turned away, clutching the bag of apples to my chest like it was gold bullion. I needed to get out of there. The noise was too much. The happy families walking their dogs, the couples holding hands. It all felt like an insult. I started walking back toward the parking lot, moving fast, trying to outrun the feeling of uselessness that was nipping at my heels. I was halfway to my truck when I heard it. The sound was wrong. In a place filled with the hum of electric cars and polite SUVs, the sound of a dying engine stands out. It was a grinding, coughing, mechanical death rattle. I looked up. A white delivery van, beat up and rusted around the wheel wells, was careening into the lot. It wasn't slowing down for the speed bumps. It bounced violently, its suspension groaning, slamming down hard. It swerved past a row of Teslas and screeched to a halt in a no-parking zone blocking the exit. Smoke hissed from under the hood. The engine sputtered and died. I stopped watching. The contractor in me noticed the bald tires and the misalignment of the front bumper. It was a vehicle that had been driven hard and neglected, just like its driver. The door flew open and a young man stumbled out. He didn't look like a delivery driver. He looked like a man running from a fire. His uniform was stained with sweat and old coffee. His hair was matted to his forehead. He was spinning in a circle, his eyes wide and frantic, scanning the crowd with a desperation that made the people nearby step back. He looked familiar. There was something about the set of his shoulders, the way he held his head, that triggered a memory buried deep in my mind. I squinted, adjusting my glasses against the glare of the sun. He turned, and for a second our eyes met across the dusty lot. I saw him freeze. I saw the color drain from his face, leaving him gray and sickly. He looked at me not with recognition, but with terror, like he was seeing a dead man walking. It was Leo. The realization hit me slowly. Leo Miller. He had been the pitcher on the high school baseball team when Nash was the catcher. They had been inseparable for 4 years. Leo had spent half his weekends at my house eating my wife's lasagna, playing video games in the basement until dawn. He had been a good kid, a little wild but loyal. I hadn't seen him since graduation, since life took them in different directions. Nash to college and construction, Leo to... Well, I didn't know where Leo had gone. But this wasn't the cocky kid with the fastball. This was a man haunted. He started moving toward me. He didn't walk. He scrambled, pushing past a woman with a stroller, knocking over a display of handmade soaps without stopping. He was clutching a cardboard box against his chest, wrapped in layers of brown packing tape. Mr. O'Connor. His voice was a rasp, a dry whisper that carried across the distance. I stood my ground, but my instincts were screaming at me to leave. Trouble was coming. I could feel it in the air. Leo reached me and stopped. He was shaking. His hands were trembling so violently that the box in his arms vibrated. He smelled of stale cigarettes and fear. He looked over his shoulder, scanning the parking lot, scanning the road, scanning the rooftops as if he expected a sniper. Leo the First said, keeping my voice low, "Son, you look like you are in trouble. Are you okay?" He looked back at me and his eyes welled up with tears. He reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip painful. "You are real," he whispered. "You are actually here." I frowned, pulling my arm back slightly. "Of course I am here, Leo. What is wrong with you? You look like you have seen a ghost." "I have," he choked out. "I am looking at one right now." He took a step closer, invading my personal space, lowering his voice to a frantic hiss. "She told us you were dead, Mr. O'Connor. Brittany, she told everyone." The world stopped. The noise of the market, the music, the chatter, it all dropped away into a buzzing silence. I stared at him, trying to process the words. "What did you say?" 4 years ago, Leo said the words, tumbling out of him in a rush. Right after Nash left. She put it in the paper. An obituary. She said you had a heart attack. She said it was quick. She said there was a private cremation. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees went weak. Dead. She had killed me. For 4 years I had been wondering why my friends stopped calling, why the Christmas cards stopped coming, why the guys from the Union Hall never checked in on me. I thought they had moved on. I thought I was just an old man they had forgotten. But they hadn't forgotten. They were mourning. She told them I was dead. Why I whispered the word, barely escaping my throat. Why would she do that? Leo didn't answer. He looked around again, paranoid, terrified. He shoved the box into my chest. It hit me hard, knocking the wind out of me. "Take it," he hissed. "Take it and hide it. What is this, Leo?" "I work for a medical courier service now," Leo said, his eyes darting back and forth. "We move things, records, samples, personal effects for state facilities. Places nobody wants to go. I was loading the van this morning. I saw the name on the transfer manifest. Nash O'Connor." I gripped the box. Nash. "He is not in Dubai," Leo said, and a tear finally escaped, rolling down his dirty cheek. "He never was." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Not in Dubai. Then where? Willow Creek. Leo whispered the name like a curse. It is a state facility 2 counties over. It is a dumping ground, Mr. O'Connor. It is where they put the people who have no money, no insurance, and no family to fight for them. It is a hole. He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers digging into my jacket. I saw the paperwork. It says he has been there for 4 years. It says his wife signed him over. It says his father is deceased. The rage that hit me was so sudden, so violent, that my vision blurred. I saw red, pure white-hot red. She signed him over. She said I was dead so no one would question why his father wasn't there. She erased me so she could erase him. Open it, Leo said, stepping back. Just open it. But do not let her see. Do not let that witch know you have it. If she finds out I brought this to you. She knows people, Mr. O'Connor. She knows bad people. Leo. I have to go. Leo gasped. He looked at the entrance of the market as if he expected a black sedan to roll up any second. I stole this. If my boss finds out the box is missing, I am fired. If Brittany finds out, I am dead. He turned and ran. He sprinted back to his van, stumbling once, catching himself, and diving into the driver's seat. The engine cranked, groaned, and finally caught. He peeled out of the parking lot tires, screeching, leaving a cloud of black smoke hanging in the air. I stood alone in the crowd holding the box. It felt heavy, heavier than concrete, heavier than steel. People were staring at me. They had seen the scene. They had seen the crazy delivery driver shouting at the old man. I saw a woman whisper to her husband, pointing at me. I didn't care. I looked down at the box. It was an old shoebox wrapped in layers of brown packing tape. On the side, written in black marker, was a sequence of numbers and a name. Patient 394. Transfer pending. And below that, in smaller letters, Nash O'Connor. My son wasn't a contractor. He wasn't a hero. He was patient 394. I clutched the box to my chest, covering the name with my arm. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. I needed to sit down. I needed to breathe. But I couldn't do it here. I couldn't open this Pandora's box in the middle of a farmer's market surrounded by strangers buying organic kale. I walked to my truck. My legs felt numb, like they didn't belong to me. I moved on autopilot. I unlocked the door, climbed in, and sat in the baking heat of the cab. I put the box on the passenger seat. It sat there, innocent and terrifying. My mind was racing, putting the pieces together. The lack of phone calls. The robotic voice on the phone yesterday. The father. It wasn't a bad connection. It wasn't a satellite delay. It was Nash. But it was a Nash who was broken. A Nash who was trapped. I looked at my hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady them. She told them I was dead. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just greed. It was a surgical removal of my existence. She hadn't just stolen my house and my money. She had stolen my identity in this town. She had made me a ghost while I was still breathing. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, a familiar, comforting sound in a world that had suddenly gone mad. I couldn't go home. Not yet. If I went home now, if I saw her face, I would kill her. I would wrap my hands around her throat, and I would squeeze until the lies stopped coming out. And then I would go to prison, and Nash would die in that hole. I needed to be smart. I needed to see what was in the box. I pulled out of the lot, driving slowly, carefully. I drove to a public park on the edge of town, a place with a thick grove of trees and a secluded parking lot near the restrooms. I parked in the shade. I reached for the box. I took out my pocket knife, the one Nash had given me for my 60th birthday. I extended the blade. I sliced the tape. The sound of the tape ripping was loud in the quiet cab. I folded back the cardboard flaps. I looked inside, and as the sunlight hit the contents of that box, I felt the last remnant of the gentle father I used to be wither and die. In its place, something cold and hard began to take shape. The adjustment had begun. But first, I had to see the horror with my own eyes. The park restroom was a concrete bunker that smelled of industrial bleach and stale urine. It was the kind of place people only used when they had no other choice, a place of last resorts. I kicked the door of the handicap stall shut and slid the rusted metal lock into place. My breath was coming in short, sharp gasps echoing off the graffiti-covered tiles. I placed the box on the baby changing station, which was hanging off its hinges by a single screw. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed like an angry hornet flickering in a rhythm that made my headache worse. I stared at the box. In the dim light, the brown packing tape looked like scars running across the cardboard. I took my pocket knife out again. My hand was steady now, but it was a cold rigor mortis kind of steady. I sliced the remaining tape and folded back the flaps. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of a gift or a care package. It was the smell of a basement of old paper and neglect. I reached in and pulled out a stack of envelopes bound together with a thick rubber band. There must have been 50 of them. The paper was cheap, thin, and yellowing at the edges. I held one up to the flickering light. The handwriting was erratic, scrawled in pencil, the letters large and jagged like a child's. But I recognized the loop of the J. I recognized the way the T was crossed with a fierce, downward slash. It was Nash's handwriting, but it looked like it had been written during an earthquake. I looked at the address. Jackson O'Connor. My address. The house I built. And then I looked at the stamp. It wasn't a postage stamp. It was a red ink stamp that read, "Return to sender. Recipient deceased." I felt the air leave my lungs. Deceased. She had done it. Brittany had not only told the town I was dead, she had told the facility holding my son that I was dead. She had told the post office I was dead. She had made sure that every cry for help my son tried to send out bounced right back to the hell he was living in. I ripped open the top letter. The paper tore easily. "Dear Pops, the nurse Jenny says she will try to mail this. I do not know if you are getting these. Brittany came today. She said you are gone. She said your heart gave out. I do not believe her, Pops. You are strong. You are the strongest man I know. If you are there, please come. I cannot walk. My words get stuck. They keep me in the dark. Please, Pops, just come get me." I dropped the letter. It fluttered to the dirty tile floor. I grabbed the next one. And the next. They were all the same. Please for help. Please for rescue. Dated 4 years ago. 3 years ago. 2 years ago. The most recent one was dated last month. It was just a drawing. A stick figure of a man in a bed and a question mark. I leaned against the wall, the cold tile pressing against my forehead. My son thought I was dead. For 4 years, he had been mourning me while I was sitting in his kitchen drinking coffee and letting his wife treat me like a dog. He thought I had abandoned him to the darkness. I reached back into the box. Under the letters was a thick manila folder. I opened it. It was a financial ledger, banking statements from a joint account I didn't know existed. O'Connor Disability Trust. I ran my finger down the columns. The numbers were staggering. Deposit Workers Compensation Settlement, $1.2 million. Deposit Monthly Disability Stipend, $6,500. My eyes widened. Nash hadn't gone to Dubai for a contract. He had been hurt. Badly. The settlement date was 4 years ago, the exact week he supposedly flew out. I looked at the withdrawals. Transfer to B. O'Connor, $8,000. Transfer to B. O'Connor, $10,000. Purchase Mercedes-Benz dealership. Purchase luxury escapes travel. Purchase Sephora. It went on for pages. She was draining him. She was stripping the meat off his bones while he was still alive. The money he had received for his legs, for his life, for his future, she was using it to buy silk robes and host parties for her investors. She wasn't investing his salary. She was embezzling his pain. I felt a bile rise in my throat, hot and acidic. But I forced it down. I had to see the rest. I had to see it all. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in a dirty t-shirt, was the tablet. It was an old model, the screen spider-webbed with cracks. It had a piece of masking tape on the back with the name Leo written on it. Leo must have smuggled this into him. Or maybe Leo smuggled it out. I pressed the power button. The battery icon flashed red. I prayed. I actually prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Please. Just give me 5 minutes. The screen lit up. It was dim, but it worked. There was a gallery of videos. I clicked the most recent one. The video opened. The camera angle was low, looking up from a lap. The lighting was terrible, the harsh fluorescent glare of an institution. And there he was. My knees finally gave out. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor, sitting in the grime of the public restroom, staring at the small, cracked screen. Nash O'Connor, my son, who had been a linebacker in high school, who could carry 2 sheets of drywall up a ladder without breaking a sweat, was gone. The man on the screen was a skeleton. His skin was gray and papery, stretched tight over his cheekbones. His head was shaved, revealing a long, angry scar that ran from his temple and disappeared behind his ear. A dent in his skull. He was strapped into a wheelchair, a strap across his chest, a strap across his legs. He was trying to look at the camera, but his left eye wandered, drifting lazily to the side. His mouth hung open slightly on the left side, drool pooling at the corner. He raised his right hand. It was shaking violently. He pointed at the camera. He tried to speak. The sound that came out was a guttural moan, a sound of pure frustration and agony. It wasn't the robotic voice on the phone. That had been fake. That had been AI or some edited recording Brittany played to keep me docile. This was the reality. He took a deep breath, his chest rattling. He focused every ounce of his will. Da. He squeezed his eyes shut, tears leaking out. He hit his own leg with his fist, punishing himself for his inability to speak. He reached down and picked up a small whiteboard. He held it up to the camera. Not Dubai. He erased it with his sleeve. Accident. 2020. He erased it. She said you died. He lowered the board. He looked into the lens, and for a second, the old Nash was there. The fire was there, burning deep behind the damage. He made a sound again, forcing his tongue to obey. Kill her. Pops. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the restroom was absolute. The buzzing of the light seemed to stop. The world contracted down to the size of that stall. I looked at the black screen where my son's face had been. Kill her. That was his message. Not save me. Not help me. Kill her. Because he knew. He knew what she was. He knew that as long as she was breathing, he was a prisoner. My stomach convulsed. I didn't have a choice. I leaned over the toilet and retched. I vomited until there was nothing left, until my ribs ached and my throat burned. I heaved up the coffee I had made in her kitchen. I heaved up the fear. I heaved up the years of being polite, of being quiet, of walking on eggshells. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I stood up. I looked in the mirror above the sink. The glass was dirty, splattered with water spots and grime. But the man looking back at me was different. The eyes were the same blue, but the softness was gone. The hesitation was gone. The Jackson O'Connor who apologized for taking up space was dead. Brittany had killed him. She had killed him just as surely as she tried to kill my son. I washed my face. The cold water felt like a baptism. I dried my hands on my jeans. I picked up the box. I put the letters back inside. I put the tablet back inside. I put the bank statements back inside. I walked out of the restroom. The heat of the day hit me, but I didn't feel it. I felt cold. Ice cold. I walked to my truck and placed the box gently on the seat. I looked at my watch. It was 2 p.m. Brittany was at the salon getting ready for her party. She was probably laughing, telling her stylist about her annoying father-in-law. She thought she had buried us. She thought she had put Nash in a hole and me in a corner. She was wrong. She had dug 2 graves, that was true, but she had forgotten to check if we were actually in them. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I looked at the contact list. I scrolled past home. I scrolled past Brittany. I stopped at a number I hadn't called in 10 years, a number I kept for emergencies, a number for a man named Weiss. Weiss wasn't a family lawyer. He wasn't the kind of lawyer you called for a will or a traffic ticket. Weiss was a shark. He was the kind of lawyer you called when you wanted to burn a kingdom to the ground and salt the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. I dialed. It rang twice. Weiss here. His voice was gravel and smoke. Weiss, it is Jack O'Connor. Jack. I heard you were dead. Yeah, I said, starting the engine of my truck. I heard that too, but I got better. I need to hire you, Weiss. What is the job? I need you to help me gut a company, I said, my eyes fixed on the horizon. And then I need you to help me put someone in prison for the rest of their natural life. I have an opening, Weiss said. Meet me in an hour. I hung up. I put the truck in gear. I wasn't going to the party. I wasn't going to the basement. I was going to Willow Creek. It was 200 miles away, 4 hours of driving. I looked at the box on the seat next to me. Hang on, son, I whispered. The cavalry is coming, and God help anyone who stands in my way. I left my truck in the long-term parking lot at the bus station downtown. I didn't want to risk taking it. Brittany had installed a tracking app on my phone a year ago, claiming it was for my safety, in case I got lost or confused, but I knew she had probably put a tag on the truck too. I turned my phone off and pulled the battery out. Then I walked 3 blocks to a budget car rental agency tucked behind a gas station. I paid cash for a nondescript gray sedan. A car that looked like nothing. A car that disappeared into the background. The drive to Willow Creek took 4 hours. I drove through the endless stretch of desert highway, watching the heat shimmer off the asphalt. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard, my fingers ached, but I couldn't relax. Every mile marker I passed felt like a countdown. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed the silence. I needed to focus on the rage boiling in my gut, because if I let it cool down, if I let the sadness take over, I wouldn't be able to do what needed to be done. Willow Creek wasn't a town. It was a scar on the landscape. It was a cluster of dying businesses surrounding a massive, hulking brick building that looked more like a penitentiary than a care facility. A chain-link fence topped with razor wire surrounded the perimeter. The grass was dead and yellow. The windows were barred. I parked the rental car in the cracked lot. The air smelled of industrial laundry detergent and something sweeter, something rotting. I walked to the front entrance. A security guard who looked like he was half asleep glanced at me from behind a plexiglass window. Here to visit, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Name, the guard grunted, not looking up from his phone. I hesitated. If I said Nash O'Connor, he might tell me there was no one here by that name. The box said Patient 394. Patient 394, I said. The guard tapped a few keys on a greasy keyboard. 3rd floor. West wing. Room 312. You got 20 minutes. Visiting hours are almost over. He buzzed the door open. I walked into a hallway that smelled of bleach and urine. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and flickered, casting long, twitching shadows on the linoleum floor. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. It rattled and shook as it ascended. When the doors opened, the smell hit me harder. It was the smell of neglect. The smell of bodies that hadn't been washed often enough. I walked down the corridor counting the room numbers. 308, 310, 312. The door was open. The room was dark, the blinds drawn against the afternoon sun. There were 4 beds in the room, cramped together with barely enough space to walk between them. 3 of the beds were occupied by lumps under thin gray sheets. I walked to the bed in the far corner. There was a man lying there. He was curled on his side facing the wall. He was so thin, his shoulder blade pushed against the fabric of his gown like a shark fin. "Nash," I whispered. The figure on the bed froze. Then slowly, painfully, he rolled over. I had to grab the metal railing of the bed to keep from falling. My knees turned to water. It was my son, but it wasn't. The Nash I knew was 220 pounds of muscle. This man was a skeleton wrapped in skin. His cheeks were hollow caves. His eyes were huge and sunken, rimmed with red. He had a feeding tube taped to his nose. He looked at me, and for a second, there was no recognition in his eyes, just fear. He flinched as if he expected me to hit him. "It is me son," I said, my voice breaking. "It is Pops." His eyes widened. His mouth opened, but only a dry, raspy sound came out. He tried to lift his hand, but it trembled and fell back onto the mattress. Tears welled up in his eyes and spilled over, running down into his ears. He started to make a sound, a high, keening whine deep in his throat. It was the sound of an animal that had been caught in a trap for so long, it had forgotten what freedom felt like. I lowered the bed rail. I sat on the edge of the mattress and pulled him into my arms. He felt fragile, like a bird made of hollow bones. He buried his face in my chest and sobbed. He didn't have the strength to hold me back, so I held him for both of us. I rocked him back and forth, stroking his shaved head, feeling the jagged scar under my fingers. "I got you," I whispered over and over. "I got you." I didn't know. I swear to God, Nash, I didn't know. He cried until he was exhausted, until his breath came in hitching gasps. I pulled back and looked at him. I wiped his face with the sleeve of my shirt. "We are leaving," I said. "I am taking you out of here right now." I stood up, ready to lift him, ready to carry him out of this hellhole on my back if I had to. But as I reached for him, Nash started shaking his head. His eyes were wide with panic. He grabbed my wrist with his good hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "No," he croaked. The word was barely intelligible. "No. Pops. Why not Nash? We are going home." "No home," he gasped, saliva bubbling at the corner of his mouth. She, kill." I froze. "She kill," he repeated, his eyes pleading. "Money. Gone. She, run." I understood. I understood instantly. If I took him out now, if I walked him out the front door, the facility would call the legal guardian. They would call Brittany. She would know the game was up. She would drain the accounts, she would burn the evidence, and she would disappear. Or worse, she would fight. She had power of attorney. She had legal documents saying I was dead or incompetent. She could call the police and say I was kidnapping a vulnerable adult. She would win. And Nash knew it. He had been lying here for 4 years, thinking about it. I sat back down. My heart was hammering against my ribs. He was right. I couldn't just use brute force. I had to be smarter than her. I had to be the general, not the soldier. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay, son. You are right. We have to be smart. I looked around the room. I saw the filth. I saw the tray of untouched food that looked like gray paste. I saw the way the nurse in the hallway ignored the call light blinking above the door. I cannot leave you here, Nash. I cannot leave you in this place for one more night, Weiss Nash whispered. Weiss, I asked. The lawyer. Nash nodded once. Shark. I smiled a grim, humorless smile. Yeah, Weiss is a shark. I called him on the way here. I pulled a burner phone from my pocket. I had bought it at the gas station along with the map. I dialed the number Weiss had given me 10 years ago. It rang 3 times. Weiss Law. I need to speak to Saul Weiss. It is Jackson O'Connor. Hold, please. A moment later, a gravelly voice came on the line. Jack. I thought you were dead. That seems to be the rumor, I said. I am at Willow Creek. I found him, Saul. I found Nash. There was a long silence on the other end. Is he alive? Barely. He is in a state-run dump. She put him here, Saul. She told everyone he was in Dubai, and she put him here to rot while she spent his disability settlement. I need you to get him out. Jack said, his voice shifting from surprised to professional in a heartbeat. But you cannot just walk him out. You need a court order or a transfer request from a superior medical facility. And you need it fast. How much, I asked. To do it tonight. To do it quiet so she doesn't find out until it is too late. It is going to be expensive, Jack. We need a private ambulance. We need a private facility that accepts cash and asks no questions about guardianship until the morning. You are looking at $50,000 just to open the doors. I looked at Nash. I looked at the fear in his eyes. Do it, I said. Jack, do you have that kind of money? Weiss asked gently. I know things have been tight. I have it, I said. I didn't tell him how. I didn't tell him about the land. My wife Sarah had inherited 40 acres of scrubland in New Mexico 30 years ago. We never built on it. We never talked about it. When she died, I sold it. I got $450,000. I never told Nash. I never told anyone. I put it in a separate account, a rainy day, fund a shield against the world. I lived off my pension and my Social Security because I wanted to save that money for Nash's children. I wanted to leave a legacy. Well, it was raining now. It was a hurricane. Transfer him to St. Jude's private care, I said. The one in Scottsdale. I will meet the transport team at the rear loading dock in 2 hours. Consider it done, Weiss said. And Jack, do not kill her yet. We need her signature on a few things first. I hung up. I turned back to Nash. He was watching me, his eyes lucid and sharp despite his broken body. Here is the plan, son, I said, leaning close, whispering so the walls wouldn't hear. I am going to move you tonight. A private ambulance is coming. They are going to take you to a place with real doctors and clean sheets. A place where she cannot get to you. He nodded, tears leaking again. But I cannot come with you, I said, and the words tasted like bile. I have to go back. I have to go back to the house. I have to pretend I don't know anything. Why, he rasped. Because we need to catch her, Nash. We need to get it all back. The house, the money, your dignity. If I blow my cover now, she walks away with everything, and we are left with nothing but medical bills. I need to get her to sign her life away before she knows the axe is falling. Nash reached out and grabbed my hand again. He squeezed it hard. Get her, he whispered. I will, I promised. I am going to burn her world down, Nash. I am going to leave her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a prison record. I stayed with him for another hour. I fed him water from a cup with a straw. I wiped his face with a wet paper towel. I told him about the truck, about the garden, about the things that didn't matter, just so he could hear my voice. When my phone buzzed, it was a text from Weiss. Transport team is 5 minutes out. Back entrance. Be ready. I stood up. I kissed my son on the forehead, right on that jagged scar. I will see you soon, I said. Next time I see you, we will be free. I walked out of the room. I didn't look at the nurse station. I walked to the fire exit at the end of the hall and pushed the bar. The alarm was silent, disconnected years ago. I stepped out into the humid evening air. A sleek black ambulance with tinted windows was idling by the dumpster. 2 large men in dark uniforms stepped out. Mr. O'Connor, one asked. Take care of him, I said, my voice choking. He is all I have. We will get him settled, sir. Dr. Weiss has arranged everything. He will be listed as a John Doe for tonight. No digital footprint. I watched them go inside. I waited until they came out wheeling a gurney with a shape covered in a blanket. They loaded him in. They drove away. I stood alone in the parking lot of Willow Creek. My son was safe. He was gone, but he was safe. Now came the hard part. I walked back to my rental car. I drove it back to the city. I returned it to the agency and wiped down the steering wheel and the door handles. I walked back to the bus station and retrieved my truck. I sat in the cab of my old Ford and put the battery back in my phone. It pinged instantly. Missed calls, texts. Where are you? The party started. Party. You are embarrassing me. I looked at the time. It was 11:30 at night. The party would be winding down. The investors would be drunk on expensive champagne. I started the truck. I wasn't Jackson the victim anymore. I wasn't the old man who needed a place to stay. I was the trap. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Music was thumping. People were laughing on the lawn. I turned off the engine. I reached into the glove box and pulled out a small flask of whiskey I kept for emergencies. I poured a little on my shirt. I splashed a little on my face. I gargled a mouthful and spit it out so my breath would reek. I needed to look weak. I needed to look pathetic. I needed to look like a confused old drunk who had made a mistake. I stumbled out of the truck. I hunched my shoulders. I let my mouth hang open a little. I walked toward the front door, ready to give the performance of a lifetime. Brittany was waiting. She was standing on the porch, holding a glass of wine, wearing a dress that glittered like diamonds. She saw me, and her face twisted into a mask of pure fury. "Where the hell have you been?" she hissed, marching down the steps. I swayed on my feet. I looked at her with glassy eyes. I got lost, Brittany," I slurred. "I went to the bank." She stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "The bank? Why did you go to the bank, Jackson? You don't have any money." I reached into my jacket pocket. My hand was shaking perfectly, not from fear, but from the act. I pulled out a thick envelope. It was stuffed with brochures from the bank, but it looked like a stack of cash. I wanted to help," I stammered. "I found Sarah's old account. The secret one. 200,000, Brittany. I wanted to give it to you for the business." Her eyes went wide. The fury vanished, replaced instantly by a hunger so raw it made her look like a wolf. 200,000, she whispered. "But," I continued, letting a sob escape my throat. "They wouldn't let me take it. Said I needed a guardian. Said I was too old." I slumped against the porch railing, letting the envelope dangle from my fingers. "I just wanted to help," I whined. "I am useless, Brittany. I cannot even give you the money." She stepped closer. She reached out and took the envelope from my hand, gentle as a mother with a newborn. She smelled the whiskey on me, but she didn't care. She only smelled the money. "Oh, Jackson," she cooed, her voice transforming into honey. "You aren't useless. You just need a little help." She put her arm around my shoulders, guiding me toward the door. "Why do not you come inside? We can talk about this. I can go with you tomorrow. I can sign whatever they need." I leaned into her, playing the part of the broken old man. "Would you," I asked, looking up at her with teary eyes. "Would you do that for me?" "Of course," she said, smiling that shark smile. "We are family, Jackson. That is what family does." We walked into the house, and as we crossed the threshold, I knew I had her. She had taken the bait. Now all I had to do was set the hook. The whiskey burned my skin where I had splashed it, and the fumes filled the cab of the truck, turning the air thick and pungent. It was cheap stuff, the kind that smelled like gasoline and bad decisions. I took a mouthful, swished it around my gums until they tingled, and then spit it out the open window onto the driveway. I needed to smell like a man who had lost his way. I needed to smell like a liability. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed from the tears I had shed at the hospital, and the exhaustion that was settling deep in my bones. That part was real. I didn't have to fake the tiredness. I felt every one of my 72 years, weighing me down like wet concrete. But I had to fake the weakness. I had to fake the confusion. I mussed my hair, knocking my cap askew. I unbuttoned the top button of my flannel shirt and let my shoulders slump forward, collapsing my chest, making myself look smaller. I wasn't Jackson O'Connor, the man who could frame a house in a week. I was Jackson the burden, Jackson the old fool. I looked at the house. My house. The windows were blazing with light. The bass from the sound system was thumping so hard I could feel it in the steering wheel. Shadows moved behind the curtains. Brittany's investors. The people she was trying to impress with the money she had stolen from a man lying in a hospital bed with a feeding tube. I took a deep breath, inhaling the whiskey fumes. "Showtime," I whispered. I opened the truck door and stumbled out. I made sure to catch my foot on the running board, nearly tripping. I let out a groan loud enough to be heard. I weaved up the walkway, my boots scuffing against the pavers I had laid myself. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open, and the noise of the party hit me like a physical wall. Laughter, clinking glasses, the low thrum of expensive conversation. I stepped into the foyer. The house had been transformed. White lilies were everywhere, massive arrangements that smelled suffocatingly sweet. Waiters in black vests were circulating with silver trays. The guests were young, beautiful, and polished, holding champagne flutes and looking bored. I stood there, swaying slightly, blinking in the bright light. I looked like a stain on a white tablecloth. A waiter saw me first. His eyes widened and he stepped back, pulling his tray away as if I were contagious. Then a woman in a sequined dress turned around. She gasped. The chatter died down. One by one, the heads turned. The music seemed to get louder as the voices stopped. And then I saw her. Brittany was at the center of the room, holding court near the fireplace. She was wearing a silver dress that looked like liquid mercury. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like a queen. She saw me and the smile dropped from her face so fast, it was like a light switch had been flipped. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated rage. She handed her glass to a guest without looking at them and marched toward me. Her heels clicked on the marble floor like gunfire. She grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my bicep through the flannel shirt, sharp and painful. She didn't say a word. She just dragged me. She pulled me out of the foyer and into the kitchen, shoving me through the swinging door so hard I stumbled and had to grab the counter to keep from falling. The kitchen was empty of guests, only a few catering staff who looked up in alarm. "Out!" Brittany hissed at them. "Get out! Now!" They scrambled, exiting through the side door, leaving us alone. Brittany spun on me. Her face was twisted, ugly with anger. "Where the hell have you been?" she screamed, her voice a low guttural shriek that she kept quiet enough not to alert the party, but loud enough to rattle the plates. I swayed, gripping the counter. I looked at her with glassy, unfocused eyes. I got lost, Brittany. Lost, she spat. You have lived in this town for 40 years, Jackson. How do you get lost? Do you know what time it is? It is midnight. You missed the entire event. You embarrassed me. People were asking where Nash's father was. I had to tell them you were unwell. I let my head hang low. I let a little drool gather at the corner of my mouth. I am sorry, I slurred. I went to the bank, she froze. The anger didn't leave her face, but it changed. It sharpened. The bank, she repeated. Why did you go to the bank, Jackson? You do not have any money. Your account is overdrawn. I checked it this morning. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. My hand was shaking, trembling violently. I made sure of it. I fumbled with the thick envelope I had prepared. It was stuffed with brochures and junk mail to give it weight, but on the outside I had written a sequence of numbers in shaky black marker. I wanted to help, I stammered. I know I am a burden, Brittany. I know I cost too much. I held the envelope out to her. I found it, I whispered. Sarah's old account. The rainy day fund. She hid it. From the taxman. Brittany stared at the envelope. She didn't take it yet. She was suspicious. She was a predator, and predators are always wary of traps. What are you talking about, Jackson? Sarah didn't have any money. She did, I said, letting a tear leak out of my eye. 40 acres. In New Mexico, she sold it. Years ago. Cash. She put it in a box. In the safety deposit. 200,000, Brittany. Her eyes went wide. The pupils dilated. I saw the calculation happening in real time. $200,000. That was enough to pay off her credit cards. That was enough to lease a new Rover. That was enough to keep the charade going for another year. 200,000, she whispered, the number rolling off her tongue like a prayer. I wanted to give it to you. I whined, leaning back against the cabinets, sliding down a few inches, like my legs were giving out. For Nash. For the investments. She snatched the envelope from my hand. She ripped it open. She saw the papers inside. They weren't cash, but they were bank documents. Old ones. Papers I had kept from the land sale years ago, mixed with the junk. She saw the balance figure I had highlighted. She looked at me, and the fury was gone. In its place was a hunger so raw, it made her look almost feral. You have this money, she asked, her voice trembling. Why didn't you tell me? I forgot, I said, tapping my head. My memory. It goes. I went today. To get it. I wanted to surprise you. I let out a sob. A pathetic, broken sound, but they wouldn't let me take it, Brittany. The man at the bank. He said I was too old. He said I was confused. He said I couldn't move that much money without a guardian. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, my back against the dishwasher. I put my head in my hands. I am useless, I cried. I am just a useless old drunk. I cannot even give you the money. They are going to lock the account. They said, if I do not come back with a guardian, they will freeze it. The silence in the kitchen stretched for 5 seconds. 10. Then I heard her move. She didn't kick me. She didn't yell. She crouched down. The scent of her expensive perfume washed over me, masking the smell of the whiskey. I felt her hand on my shoulder. It was light, gentle. It was the touch of a butcher checking the quality of the meat. Oh, Jackson, she cooed. Her voice had transformed. It was honey and silk. It was the voice she used on the phone with her investors. You aren't useless. Do not say that. I looked up at her, peering through my fingers. They said I was crazy, Brittany. They said I needed help. Well, they are wrong, she said, smoothing my hair back. You are not crazy, Jackson. You are just tired. You have been through so much. Losing Nash. Missing him, I mean. And Sarah. It is a lot for anyone. She smiled. It was a terrifying smile because it looked so genuine. She was good. She was really good. I can help you, she said softly. I can go with you. You would, I asked, sniffling. You would do that for me? Of course. We are family, Jackson. Nash would want me to help you. I can be your guardian, just for this, just to get the money out so it is safe. We do not want the bank to freeze it, do we? That money belongs to the family. I nodded vigorously. Yes. Yes. To the family. I grabbed her hand with my rough, calloused fingers. Tomorrow, I begged. We have to go tomorrow. Before they lock it. Tomorrow, she agreed, squeezing my hand. First thing in the morning. I will cancel my appointments. I will drive you myself. She stood up, offering me a hand. Come on, let us get you to bed. You smell terrible, Jackson. Did you drink? I had a sip, I lied. For the nerves. You naughty boy, she chided, but there was no heat in it. Not when there was 200 grand on the table. Go downstairs, wash up, get a good night's sleep. We have a big day tomorrow. I stumbled to my feet, using her arm for support. She led me to the basement door like I was a toddler. Good night, Jackson, she said. Sleep well. Good night, Brittany, I mumbled. Thank you. Thank you for helping me. I closed the basement door. I heard the lock click from the other side de sens. She always locked it at night. I stood on the landing in the dark. I listened to her heels click away back toward the party, back toward the champagne and the lies. I walked down the wooden steps into the cool darkness of the basement. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't need to. I knew every inch of this house. I walked to the utility sink in the corner. I turned on the cold water. I splashed it on my face, scrubbing away the whiskey, scrubbing away the sweat, scrubbing away the feel of her hand on my shoulder. I stood there in the dark water dripping from my chin. She had taken the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. She thought she was going to the bank to collect a windfall. She thought she was going to sign a paper that would give her control over my last asset. She thought she had won. She didn't know that the bank we were going to wasn't my bank. It was a bank where Saul Weiss had a friend in the private wealth division. She didn't know that the papers she was going to sign weren't for a deposit. They were for a transfer. I had spent the last of my liquid cash hiring Weiss, but I had one thing left. The company. O'Connor Construction. It had been defunct for 4 years, but the corporate shell still existed, and attached to that shell was a massive liability. A lawsuit I had settled years ago, but structured as a long-term debt. It was a dormant poison pill. Tomorrow I wasn't going to give her $200,000. I was going to transfer the controlling interest of O'Connor Construction to her. I was going to make her the CEO, the primary shareholder, and the sole guarantor of the company's assets and liabilities. And the moment she signed that paper, she would be personally responsible for a debt that exceeded the value of this house, the value of her car, and the value of every jar of face cream she owned. And she would sign it. She would sign it without reading the fine print, because Weiss would bury it in a stack of legalese, and because she was arrogant. She thought I was stupid. She thought I was a senile old drunk who couldn't tie his own shoes. She would see the words, transfer of assets, and she would sign her name with a flourish. I dried my face with a rough towel. I walked over to my cot. I sat down and pulled out the burner phone I had hidden under the mattress. I sent a text to Weiss. She bit. 9 a.m. tomorrow. I put the phone away. I lay down on the cot, staring up at the exposed floor joists of the living room above me. I could hear the muffled thump of the music. I could hear the footsteps of the people dancing on the floor I had built. Enjoy it, Brittany, I whispered into the darkness. Dance, drink, laugh, because tomorrow the music stops. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't see the darkness. I saw Nash's face. Not the broken man in the hospital bed, but the boy who used to help me carry lumber. I am coming for you, son. Just hold on, I didn't sleep well. I slept like a soldier in a trench waiting for the dawn signal. But I slept. And when I woke up, the sun was streaming through the small basement window, and I felt a cold calm settle over me. I put on my best suit. It was old and a little moth-eaten at the cuffs, but it was clean. I shaved. I combed my hair. I wasn't Jackson the drunk anymore. I wasn't Jackson the victim. I was the executioner. And I had an appointment. Brittany drove the Range Rover with her knee while she checked her makeup in the rearview mirror. She was humming a pop song softly under her breath, a sound of pure, unadulterated victory. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching my seatbelt with both hands, playing the part of the nervous old invalid. The air conditioning was blasting, freezing the sweat on my neck, but I didn't complain. I just stared out the window at the Scottsdale skyline rising from the desert floor, like a mirage of glass and steel. We were heading to a bank in the financial district. Not my bank. Brittany didn't know that. She thought we were going to the First National branch where Sarah had kept her accounts. But I had told her the safety deposit box was at a private wealth management firm called Sterling & Weiss. I told her that was where Sarah hid the money to keep it away from the IRS. Brittany believed it because greed makes people gullible. She believed it because she wanted to believe there was a secret pot of gold waiting for her. You are quiet today, Jackson, she said, glancing at me with a smirk. Nervous about the money, I just don't want to get in trouble, Brittany. I stammered, letting my voice crack. The man said it was irregular. Do not worry about the man, she said, patting my knee with a condescension that made my skin crawl. I can handle men in suits. I will do the talking. You just nod and sign where I tell you. I nodded, staring at my boots. Yes, Brittany. Just sign. We pulled into the underground parking garage of a sleek black glass tower. Brittany tossed the keys to the valet without making eye contact and marched toward the elevator, her heels clicking on the concrete. I shuffled behind her, trying to look small, trying to look like a man who was being led to his own execution. In a way, I was. But it wasn't my execution. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was silent. When the doors opened, we stepped into a lobby that smelled of old money and leather. A receptionist with a headset looked up and smiled professionally. Mr. O'Connor, she said. Mr. Weiss is expecting you. Conference room B. She led us down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my truck. Brittany was looking around, assessing the value of the place. I could see her relaxing. This was her element. Wealth. Power. She felt safe here. We entered the conference room. It was dominated by a massive mahogany table. At the far end sat Saul Weiss. Weiss looked exactly like the shark he was. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like armor. His silver hair was slicked back, and his eyes behind rimless glasses were cold and calculating. He didn't smile when we walked in. He stood up slowly, imposing his presence on the room. Mr. O'Connor, he said, his voice a deep baritone that commanded attention. And this must be the guardian you mentioned. Brittany stepped forward, extending her hand. I am Brittany O'Connor, Jackson's daughter-in-law. I handle his affairs. Weiss shook her hand briefly, then gestured to the leather chairs opposite him. Please. Sit, We have a lot of paperwork to get through if we are going to execute this transfer before the audit deadline. Audit deadline, Brittany asked, sitting down and crossing her legs. Jackson didn't mention an audit. I leaned forward, wringing my hands. I forgot. They said, the government is looking. Weiss nodded gravely, shuffling a stack of documents on the table. The file was 3 inches thick. Standard procedure, Mrs. O'Connor, he said smoothly. When dormant assets of this magnitude are reactivated, especially ones that were perhaps shielded from initial tax assessments, the IRS takes notice. To access the $200,000 immediately and avoid a freeze, we need to restructure the ownership of the holding entity. Holding entity? Brittany asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. I thought this was just a savings account. Weiss chuckled, a dry sound, like dry leaves scraping together. Rich people do not have savings accounts, Mrs. O'Connor. They have entities, trusts, corporations. Your late mother-in-law structured this capital as the primary asset of a shell company. To liquidate the cash, you must assume control of the company. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a summary sheet. At the top, in bold letters, it read, Asset. Liquidity, $215,000. Brittany stared at the number. I saw her throat work as she swallowed. 215,000. It was real. It was right there on the paper. So what do we need to do? She asked, her voice breathless. Weiss opened the thick file. He spread the documents out, creating a fan of paper that covered the mahogany. Because Mr. O'Connor has been flagged as diminished capacity, Weiss said, glancing at me with fake pity, he is not legally permitted to serve as the executor of this entity. We need to transfer the entire portfolio to a trusted guardian. That would be you. He handed her a heavy fountain pen. You will need to sign here, here, and here, he said, flipping pages rapidly. This transfers the executive power. This assumes the assets. This waives the waiting period. Brittany took the pen. She looked at the first page. It was dense text, single-spaced, full of Latin phrases and legal jargon. I should probably read this, she said, hesitating. Weiss checked his watch. He sighed. Of course. You are welcome to read it. It is 40 pages of standard boilerplate for asset acquisition. However, the wire transfer window closes at 11. If we do not file by then, the funds will remain locked in escrow for another 30-day cycle. And given the audit flags, well, I cannot guarantee the government won't freeze them by then. Brittany looked at the clock on the wall. It was 10:45. She looked at the paper. She looked at me. I was sitting with my head in my hands, rocking back and forth, slightly mumbling to myself about jail. I do not want to go to jail, I whispered. Please, Brittany, just fix it. She made her decision. The greed won. It always wins. Show me where to sign, she said. Weiss pointed. She signed. A flourish of ink. Brittany O'Connor. And here. Brittany O'Connor. And initial here to acknowledge you are assuming all associated liabilities and encumbrances of the O'Connor Construction Legacy Trust. Brittany didn't even blink at the word liabilities. She was too focused on the asset column. She initialed. One last thing, Weiss said, sliding a separate document toward her. It looked different. It was a deed transfer. Because this transaction involves moving assets from a family trust into a personal holding. We need to separate the residential property from the commercial entity to protect it from the audit. This is a quitclaim deed. It temporarily reverts the title of the residence at 42 Willow Lane back to the original grantor, Jackson O'Connor, solely for the purpose of shielding it during the transaction. Once the funds clear, you can file to transfer it back. Brittany paused. The house. That was her prize. Is this necessary? She asked, suspicious. Only if you want the 200,000 today, Weiss said indifferently. If the house remains attached to your name while you accept the influx of cash, it triggers a capital gains review. You would lose about 40% of the total in taxes. 40%. $80,000. Brittany grit her teeth. Fine. She signed the deed. She signed the house back to me. She signed it because she thought it was temporary. She signed it because she thought I was a senile old fool she could manipulate into signing it back tomorrow. Excellent, Weiss said, snatching the papers away before she could look at them again. He stamped them with a heavy thud. Recorded. He looked at his computer screen and typed a few keys. The transfer is initiated. The funds should be available in the holding account within 24 hours. Brittany let out a long breath she had been holding. She smiled. It was the smile of a cat that had just eaten the canary. Thank you, Mr. Weiss. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. She looked at me. Come on, Jackson. Let us go. We have a lot of planning to do. I stood up, slowly clutching my hat. Thank you, sir, I mumbled to Weiss. Weiss looked at me over the rim of his glasses. His eyes were hard. Good luck, Mr. O'Connor. We walked out of the office. Brittany was practically skipping. She was rich. She had the money. She had saved her lifestyle. We got into the elevator. As the doors closed, she turned to me and hugged me. It was a cold, hard hug. You did good today, Jackson, she said. You finally did something useful. I stared at the numbers changing on the elevator display. 39, 38, 37. She had no idea. She had just signed a document that made her the CEO and sole owner of O'Connor Construction Legacy Trust. She thought she had acquired $200,000. What she had actually acquired was the dormant shell of my old company. And attached to that shell, buried deep in the liabilities clause she had initialed without reading, was a structured debt settlement I had negotiated 10 years ago during a lawsuit. The debt wasn't $200,000. It was $4 million. And it had a trigger clause. The moment the ownership transferred, the debt became due immediately. Weiss had already filed the papers electronically. By the time we hit the lobby, the creditors would be getting notifications. By the time we got home, the liens would be processing. And she had signed the house back to me. The only asset she had was gone. I looked at her reflection in the polished steel doors of the elevator. She was fixing her lipstick. She looked happy. I felt a cold, dark satisfaction settle in my chest. Enjoy the ride down, Brittany, I thought, because we are about to hit the bottom. When we got back to the Range Rover, she tossed her purse onto the back seat. I am going to throw a party, she announced, starting the engine. A real party, to celebrate the expansion of my business. Tomorrow night. I want you to be there, Jackson. I want everyone to see how well we take care of you. I nodded, looking out the window. I will be there, Brittany. I wouldn't miss it for the world. She drove fast, aggressive, cutting through traffic. She was invincible. She was untouchable. I put my hand in my pocket and touched the burner phone. I needed to text Weiss. I needed to tell him to initiate phase 2. But not yet. Let her have her night. Let her have her party. The higher she climbed, the harder the fall would be. And I wanted to hear every bone snap when she hit the ground. The house smelled of lilies and expensive desperation. By 7 o'clock, the entire first floor had been transformed into a stage for Brittany's vanity. She had hired a string quartet that was set up in the corner of the living room, playing soft classical music that clashed with the jagged tension in my gut. The furniture I had bought with Sarah 30 years ago had been moved into storage, replaced by rented high-top tables draped in white linen. The lighting was dimmed. The air conditioning was cranked down to Arctic levels, and the bar was stocked with bottles of champagne that cost more than my first truck. I was in the kitchen, staring at the suit Brittany had laid out for me. It was an old brown polyester thing I hadn't worn in a decade. It smelled of cedar chips and mothballs. It was the suit I had worn to my own father's funeral. It was out of style, slightly frayed at the cuffs, and since I had lost 15 pounds from stress over the last few months, I knew it would hang off me like a scarecrow's rags. That was the point. She didn't want Jackson O'Connor, the builder. She didn't want the man who could frame a roof in a day. She wanted the prop. She wanted the senile, shuffling old man who needed a guardian. She wanted to parade me in front of her friends and investors like a rescue dog she had saved from the pound. I put on the suit. The fabric scratched my neck. I buttoned the shirt, which was tight at the collar, and tied the tie loosely. I looked in the mirror. I looked pathetic. I looked beaten. Good, I whispered to my reflection. Let them see a broken man. It will make the resurrection that much more terrifying. Brittany swept into the kitchen. She was wearing a red dress that was cut low and tight, a dress that screamed money and power. She had diamonds in her ears. Diamonds I knew she had bought with the first withdrawal from Nash's disability fund. She stopped and looked me up and down. A smile of cruel satisfaction curled her lips. Perfect, she said. You look exactly like what you are. A charity case. She walked over to the counter and picked up a silver tray loaded with crystal champagne flutes. She shoved it into my hands. Here's the deal, Jackson. The catering staff is short one server. Since you are living here for free, I figure you can earn your keep. I want you to circulate. Offer drinks. Keep the glasses full. And for God's sake, do not talk. If someone asks you something, just smile and nod. If you start babbling about your old construction jobs or your dead wife, I will put you in the basement and lock the door. Do you understand? I gripped the cold silver handles of the tray. My knuckles turned white. I wanted to throw this tray against the wall. I wanted to shatter every glass. I understand, Brittany, I said, keeping my voice low and trembling. I want to help. Good. And remember, tonight is a celebration. We are celebrating the future. My future. Our future. So try not to look so miserable. She turned on her heel and marched out to greet the first wave of guests. I took a breath. I walked out into the living room. The party was in full swing within 30 minutes. The house was packed. I didn't recognize half the people there. They were the new money of Scottsdale, the real estate developers, the tech entrepreneurs, the social climbers. They were people who looked at a house and saw square footage, not the craftsmanship of the joinery or the sweat in the foundation. I moved through the crowd holding the tray. Champagne, I mumbled, offering a glass to a man in a blue velvet blazer. He didn't even look at me. He just reached out, took the glass, and kept talking to a woman with surgically enhanced lips. Whatever Brittany is doing, it is working, he said loud enough for me to hear. She says she just secured a major capital injection, something about a family trust maturing. She is talking about opening 3 new locations by Christmas. The woman laughed, sipping her drink. She is a shark, that one. I heard she finally got the father-in-law situation under control. Sad, really. Dementia is such a burden on the family. I walked away, my face burning. They were talking about me like I was a piece of furniture that needed to be reupholstered. I kept moving. I topped off glasses. I took empty plates. I played the servant in the house I owned. I saw Leo arrive. He wasn't invited, of course. He was outside, parked down the street in his beat-up van watching. We had texted earlier. He was the backup. If anything went wrong, if I couldn't trigger the video, he was ready to storm the front door. But I knew I wouldn't need him. Brittany was working the room like a politician. She was laughing, touching arms, clinking glasses. She was high on the adrenaline of her perceived victory. She thought the papers she signed yesterday had solved all her problems. She thought the $200,000 was sitting in her account ready to be spent. She didn't know that the bank alerts had already started hitting her email, which she was too busy to check. She didn't know that the liens against O'Connor Construction were already attaching themselves to her social security number like barnacles on a sinking ship. Around 9 o'clock, the music stopped. The string quartet put down their bows. Brittany walked to the center of the room. She stood on the first step of the grand staircase, giving her height over the crowd. A hush fell over the room. She tapped a spoon against her glass. "Thank you, everyone," she said, her voice projecting clear and confident. "Thank you all for coming tonight." There was a ripple of applause. I stood in the back near the kitchen door, holding my tray, hidden in the shadows. "Tonight is a special night," she continued, beaming. "As many of you know, the last few years have been challenging. With my husband Nash serving overseas working on sensitive government contracts, I have had to carry the weight of this family alone." She paused for effect, letting the sympathy wash over her. "It hasn't been easy, and recently we have had to face new challenges with Nash's father Jackson." She gestured vaguely in my direction, not looking at me, just pointing to the back of the room like she was indicating a stain on the carpet. "Jackson has been struggling," she said, dropping her voice to a respectful whisper. "His health, his memory, it is failing. It has been heartbreaking to watch the man who built this house lose his way. But as a family, we do not abandon our own." The crowd murmured their approval. "What a saint. What a martyr." "That is why today I made a decision," she announced, lifting her chin. "I have officially taken legal guardianship of Jackson and the O'Connor family estate." There was a gasp of admiration. Applause broke out louder this time. "It is a heavy responsibility," she said over the clapping, "but it is necessary. I need to ensure that the legacy of this family is protected. I need to ensure that the resources are managed correctly so that Jackson can have the care he needs in his final years." She was selling my funeral while I was standing there serving the wine. And to celebrate this new chapter, she said, her eyes glittering, "I am announcing a complete rebranding of my company. With the new capital from the family trust, we are going global." She raised her glass. "To family, to the future, and to Nash, who I know is thinking of us right now from halfway across the world." To Nash, the crowd chorused. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was the burner phone. A text from Weiss. "It is done. The video is queued. The remote access is live. You have the floor jack." I put the tray down on a side table. The glasses clinked loudly, but no one noticed. They were all looking at Brittany. She was glowing. She was basking in the adoration. She truly believed she had won. She believed she had buried the truth so deep it would never see the light of day. "Come here, Jackson," she called out, spotting me in the shadows. "Come up here. Let everyone see that you are safe. Let everyone see that you are taken care of." She wanted me to kiss the ring. She wanted the final submission. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked through the crowd. People parted for me, looking at me with pity. "Poor old man. He looks so confused. Look at that suit." I walked to the bottom of the stairs. I looked up at her. She smiled down at me, benevolent and cruel. "Come on, Jackson," she urged, reaching out a hand. "Join me." I reached into my pocket. I didn't take her hand. I took out a small black remote control. Brittany frowned. Her eyes flicked to the remote, then back to my face. She saw something there that made her smile falter. She saw the clarity. She saw the hate. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmur of the crowd. "I am adjusting the lighting." "Brittany," I said. My voice was loud, steady. It carried to the back of the room. "I am not senile," I said louder, turning to face the crowd. "And I do not need a guardian." The room went silent. The tension was instant electric. Jackson Brittany hissed, her face contorting. "Go to your room. You are having an episode." I pressed the button on the remote. Behind Brittany, a massive projection screen began to lower from the ceiling. It was part of the home theater system I had installed years ago. Brittany had intended to use it later to show a promotional video for her skincare line. "Stop it," she said, stepping down a stair, reaching for me. "Give me that." I stepped back out of her reach. "You wanted everyone to know where Nash is," I said. "You wanted everyone to know about the family legacy." I pressed the second button. The screen flickered to life. The audio popped and hissed over the surround sound speakers booming through the room. "Well, let us show them," I said. The image on the screen wasn't a skincare ad. It wasn't a photo montage. It was a live feed. The room gasped. On the screen, bright and high definition, was a hospital room. It was clean. It was white. There was a nurse adjusting a pillow, and in the bed, sitting up, supported by pillows, was a man. He was thin, he was scarred, but he was clean-shaven. He was looking directly into the camera. Brittany froze. She turned slowly to look at the screen. The glass of champagne slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble step and shattered, spraying glass and wine over her red dress. She didn't even flinch. She stared at the screen. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. On the screen, the man raised his hand. He waved, and then a mechanical voice generated by a tablet on his lap filled the room. "Hello, Brittany." The crowd was paralyzed. They looked from the screen to Brittany to me. "Did you miss me?" the mechanical voice asked. Brittany started to shake. She backed up until she hit the railing of the stairs. "No," she whispered. "No, he is in Dubai." I walked up the first step. I stood next to her. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces. "He is not in Dubai," I said, my voice cold as iron. "He never was." I pointed at the screen. "That is Nash O'Connor, my son, and for the last 4 years, he has been rotting in a state facility 200 miles from here because his wife signed a paper saying I was dead and threw him away like garbage so she could spend his disability money on parties and diamonds." A scream rose in the room. Someone dropped a glass. Brittany lunged at me. "Shut up!" she shrieked. "Shut it off! He is lying! He is crazy!" She clawed at the remote, but I caught her wrist. I held it tight. I wasn't the frail old man anymore. I was the man who bent rebar for a living. I squeezed her wrist until she cried out and dropped to her knees. "I am not crazy, Brittany," I said, looking down at her. "And I am not your guardian." I looked at the screen. Nash was watching. I could see the tears on his face. "Tell them, son," I said. On the screen, Nash tapped the tablet. "She stole my life," the voice said. "She buried me, but my father dug me up." I looked back at Brittany. She was sobbing now, huddled on the stairs, a ruin in a red dress. And by the way, I said, leaning close to her so the microphone on the remote picked up every word. "The papers you signed yesterday, you didn't inherit $200,000, Brittany. You inherited $4 million in debt. You own O'Connor Construction now, and the creditors are already filing the liens." I dropped her wrist. "Happy birthday, Brittany." Then the front door burst open. It wasn't Leo. It was the police. 4 officers led by the sheriff himself. Behind them walked Saul Weiss, carrying a briefcase like a weapon. "Brittany O'Connor." The sheriff boomed, his voice filling the stunned room. "You are under arrest." The party was over. The adjustment was complete. The silence in the room was not empty. It was heavy like the air before a tornado touches down. I stood on the first step of the grand staircase, the remote control cool and hard in my hand. I looked down at Brittany. She was still on her knees, clutching her wrist, where I had squeezed it, her red dress pooling around her like spilled blood. She looked up at me, and for the first time in 4 years, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not annoyance, not disdain, but the primal fear of a predator who realizes they have walked into a cage. I didn't shake. My hands were as steady as stone. The whiskey act was over. The confused old man was gone. I pressed the button on the remote. A low mechanical hum filled the room as the massive projection screen finished its descent from the ceiling. It was a canvas of white waiting for paint. The guests turned their heads in unison, a sea of expensive haircuts and confused expressions. They were waiting for a marketing video. They were waiting for a slideshow of Brittany's success. I pressed the second button. The screen did not flicker with a logo. It did not play upbeat music. It flashed blue for a second, and then a live video feed cut in. The resolution was crystal clear, high definition, projected 10 feet tall. It was a hospital room, but not the dungeon at Willow Creek. This room was bathed in soft, warm light. There were mahogany panels on the walls. There was a large window showing the lights of the city at night. In the center of the frame sat a state-of-the-art motorized wheelchair, and in that chair sat Nash. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It was a sound of pure shock. Brittany scrambled to her feet. She grabbed the banister, her knuckles white. She stared at the screen, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. Nash was clean. The grime of the state facility was gone. He had been bathed, shaved, and dressed in a crisp blue button-down shirt, the kind he used to wear when he was the foreman of my crew. The scar on his head was still there, angry and jagged, a map of his trauma, but his eyes were clear. They were sharp. They were focused right on the camera lens. Standing to his left was a man in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck. Standing to his right, arms crossed over his chest, was the county sheriff. The image was undeniable. It was immediate. It was real. On the screen, Nash raised his hand. It was a slow, deliberate movement. He placed his hand on a specialized tablet mounted to the arm of his wheelchair. He tapped the screen with his index finger. The speakers in the living room crackled, and then a voice filled the air. It was a synthesized voice, electronic and flat, but the cadence was unmistakable. It carried a weight that silenced every whisper in the room. "Hello, wife." The sound of that robotic voice hitting the silence of the party was like a gunshot. Brittany took a step back. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "No, that is a trick. That is a recording." I looked at the screen. I nodded to my son. Nash tapped the screen again. His eyes on the video feed narrowed. He was looking at a monitor on his end, seeing us just as we saw him. He was seeing his wife in her red dress. He was seeing the investors drinking his champagne. "Dubai looks different than I remember," the voice said. A woman in the front row dropped her purse. A man near the bar put his drink down and took a step toward the door, but stopped, unable to look away. "Is it hot? In Dubai?" "Brittany." Nash's hand moved across the tablet, typing with painful precision. "Or is it hotter in the poorhouse, where you locked me for 4 years?" Crash! The sound of shattering crystal exploded in the room. Brittany had dropped her champagne flute. It hit the marble floor and exploded, sending shards of glass and expensive vintage wine flying across the room, splashing onto the shoes of her investors. She didn't notice. She was paralyzed. Her face had drained of all color, leaving her makeup standing out like war paint on a corpse. She was shaking so hard, the sequins on her dress shimmered. "It is a lie," she screamed, her voice cracking high and hysterical. She spun around to face the crowd, her arms flailing. "It is a deep fake. It is AI. Jackson is doing this. He is sick. He is trying to hurt me." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "Turn it off," she shrieked. "Turn it off right now, Jackson." I stepped up to the microphone stand she had set up for her speech. I gripped the metal stand. I looked out at the room. I looked at the people who had laughed at my old suit, who had ignored me when I offered them drinks. She says it is fake, I said, my voice booming over the speakers, drowning out her screams. She says my son is in Dubai. She says he is a hero protecting his country. I looked down at Brittany. But heroes do not get locked in state facilities with no windows. Heroes do not get their disability checks stolen by their wives. Heroes do not get erased from the world by the people who are supposed to love them. I gestured to the screen. That is Nash O'Connor, my son. He suffered a traumatic brain injury 4 years ago on a job site. He didn't go to the desert. He went to the dark. And this woman, I pointed at Brittany, who was now backing away toward the kitchen door, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. This woman signed the papers to have him committed as a ward of the state. She signed the papers claiming I was dead so no one would challenge her guardianship, and then she spent every dime of his settlement on this house, on these clothes, and on the champagne you are all drinking right now. The room erupted. The murmur turned into a roar of outrage and shock. People were pulling out their phones recording. The investors, the ones Brittany had groomed so carefully, were looking at her with expressions of absolute revulsion. She didn't know I was alive, I continued, my voice rising. She thought I was a senile old ghost she could keep in the basement. She thought she had won. I stepped down from the landing and walked toward her. She froze, trapped between me and the crowd. But yesterday, she made a mistake. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was the copy of the papers she had signed in Weiss's office. I held them up. Yesterday, she thought she was stealing my last $200,000. She thought she was signing a guardianship paper to access a secret account. Brittany stared at the papers. Her breathing was shallow, rapid gasps. You gave me the money, she whispered. You signed it over. I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. I didn't sign over money, Brittany. I signed over a company. I unfolded the document and turned it so the crowd could see the bold header. O'Connor Construction Legacy Trust. You see, I said, addressing the room, this company has been defunct for years. But it still exists on paper, and it carries a heavy load. A lawsuit settlement from a decade ago structured as a dormant debt. I walked closer to her until I was standing right in her personal space. When you signed your name as the new CEO and primary shareholder, you didn't just get the company name. You assumed full personal liability for all outstanding debts. I leaned in close, the microphone picking up every syllable. You owe $5 million, Brittany. Her knees gave out. She didn't fall gracefully. She collapsed, dropping to the floor in a heap of red silk and terror. $5 million, she gasped. And since you signed the house back to me, to avoid the taxes, I continued enjoying the look of absolute devastation on her face. You have no assets. You have nothing. The bank liens were filed this morning. They are freezing your accounts as we speak. The car in the driveway. It is being repossessed. The jewelry you are wearing. It belongs to the creditors now. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. You cannot do this, she sobbed. I am family. Family, I repeated the word, tasting like bile. You lost the right to use that word when you left my son to rot in his own filth. I turned back to the screen. The sheriff on the video feed stepped forward, placing a hand on Nash's shoulder. He looked into the camera. That is enough, Jack, the sheriff said, his voice coming through the speakers, stern and official. We have seen enough. The warrant is active. I looked at the front door. Open it, I said. The heavy oak doors swung open. It wasn't Leo. It wasn't a guest. It was 4 uniformed officers. They marched into the room, their faces grim. The crowd parted for them, creating a wide aisle straight to where Brittany lay on the floor. Brittany O'Connor, the lead officer said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest. For what, she screamed, scrambling backward on the marble floor, kicking her heels. I didn't do anything. This is a mistake. He tricked me. You are under arrest for the kidnapping and false imprisonment of Nash O'Connor, the officer said, reciting the charges with mechanical precision. For fraud, for embezzlement of a vulnerable adult, for identity theft, and for falsifying death records. He reached down and grabbed her arm, pulling her up. She fought. She screamed. She tried to bite him. It was an ugly, primal display. "Stop it, Jackson," she shrieked, looking at me with wild eyes. Tell them I took care of you. Tell them we are partners." I stood there, straightening my old tie. I looked at her one last time. "We were never partners, Brittany. I was just the man you forgot to bury." The officer clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. The sound was sharp and final. "Take her away," I said. They dragged her out. She was screaming, cursing, crying, begging. Her heels dragged on the floor, leaving scuff marks on the marble. The guests watched in silence, recording every second of her downfall. When the door slammed shut, the silence returned. I looked at the screen. Nash was smiling. It was a crooked, broken smile, but it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I looked at the crowd. "Get out," I said quietly. Nobody moved. I said, "Get out." I roared, my voice cracking with the strain. "Get out of my house." They scrambled. The investors, the socialites, the hangers-on. They dropped their glasses, they grabbed their purses, and they ran. They streamed out the front door like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Within 2 minutes, the house was empty. Just me. And the screen. I walked over to the image of my son. I reached out and touched the projection of his face. "We did it, son," I whispered, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "We got her." On the screen, Nash tapped the tablet one last time. "Home." I nodded. "Yeah. I am coming to get you. We are going home. Not to this house. This house is poisoned. But we are going to build a new one." I turned off the projector. The room went dark. I took off the old suit jacket and threw it on the floor. I loosened my tie. I walked to the kitchen, found the bottle of expensive whiskey Brittany had been saving for a special occasion, and poured it down the sink. Then I grabbed my keys. I had a son to pick up, and we had a lot of catching up to do. The flashing lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, leaving the cul-de-sac in a heavy, stunned silence. The neighbors who had been peeking through their blinds slowly let them snap shut. The show was over. Brittany was gone. She had been dragged out, screaming, her wrists cuffed behind her back. Her perfect red dress ruined her dignity, shredded in front of the entire town and thousands of people watching online. The live stream from the guests' phones had done its work. Her face, her name, her crimes were now viral. She would never hide again. I stood in the foyer of the house I had built. The floor was sticky with spilled champagne. Broken glass glittered under the chandelier. The white lilies Brittany had ordered by the truckload were starting to wilt, their sweet smell turning cloying and sickening. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt exhausted. I felt a bone-deep weariness that had been accumulating for 4 years. But underneath the exhaustion, there was something else. A lightness. The heavy, suffocating blanket of lies was gone. I could breathe again. I walked through the house, turning off the lights one by one. I didn't clean up. I didn't pick up the glasses or the dropped purses. I left the mess where it lay. It wasn't my mess anymore. This house wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene. It was a museum of betrayal. I grabbed my keys and my old denim jacket. I walked out the front door and locked it behind me for the last time. I got into my truck and drove to the private hospital in Scottsdale. I spent that night in a chair next to Nash's bed, holding his hand, watching the monitors beep listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. For the first time in years, he slept without fear. The next few months were a blur of legal battles and logistics. Saul Weiss was a force of nature. He didn't just win the case, he annihilated the opposition. Brittany didn't even make it to trial. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, the video testimony from Nash the bank, records the forged documents, and the crushing weight of the $4 million debt she had unknowingly signed for, she took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to fraud, elder abuse, and kidnapping. She was sentenced to 25 years in state prison. The judge, a stern woman who had watched the video of Nash in that hellhole, added a stipulation that she serve at least 80% of her sentence before being eligible for parole. Brittany O'Connor, the woman who wanted to be a socialite, would spend the rest of her youth in a cell wearing orange instead of silk. I didn't go to the sentencing. I didn't need to see her again. She was part of the past, a dark chapter that was finally closed. My focus was on the future. The first thing I did was put the house on the market. I didn't care about the price, I just wanted it gone. I sold it, as is champagne stains and all, to a developer who wanted the land. The money from the sale, after paying off the remaining debts Brittany had accrued, went into a trust for Nash's care. I took the rest of my savings, the money from Sarah's land that I had protected, and I went looking for a new life. I didn't want a mansion. I didn't want a subdivision with HOA rules and nosy neighbors. I wanted space. I wanted quiet. I wanted land where I could see the stars without the light pollution of the city. I found it in a small valley 2 hours north. It was an old horse farm that had seen better days. The fences were leaning, the barn was sagging, and the main house was a small single-story ranch that hadn't been updated since the 70s. It was perfect. I bought it cash. And then, for the first time in a long time, I put on my tool belt. I hired a crew, but I didn't just supervise. I worked. I was 72 years old, but I was on the job site every morning at dawn, drinking coffee from my thermos, smelling the sawdust and the fresh paint. We gutted the house. We knocked down walls to widen the hallways. We tore out the bathrooms and installed roll-in showers with bench seats and grab bars. We built ramps, wide, sturdy ramps with gentle grades that wrapped around the porch and led down to the garden. I built it for Nash. Every nail I drove, every board I cut was a promise to him. I was building him a fortress of safety, a place where no one could ever lock him away again. Leo came to help. The kid had quit his courier job after the night at the market. He showed up one morning with a tool belt and a shy smile. He didn't ask for money. He just started carrying lumber. He worked side by side with me, sweating in the sun, helping me rebuild the life his best friend had lost. We didn't talk much about the past. We talked about the work. We talked about the future. 6 months after the arrest, the house was ready. I drove to the hospital to pick up Nash. He had been in intensive therapy, gaining weight, regaining some strength. He still couldn't walk. The damage to his spine and brain from the original accident, exacerbated by 4 years of neglect, meant the wheelchair was permanent. His speech was still slow, difficult, slurred. But he was Nash. His mind was sharp. His spirit was intact. When I wheeled him out of the hospital, blinking in the bright Arizona sun, he took a deep breath. He looked at the sky. He looked at the trees. He looked at me. "Ready, Pops?" he asked, using the tablet mounted to his chair. "Ready, son," I said. We drove to the farm. I watched him in the rearview mirror as we pulled up the long gravel driveway. I saw his eyes widen as he saw the house. It wasn't grand. It was simple. It was sturdy. It was painted a warm sage green with white trim. There were flower boxes in the windows filled with marigolds. I parked the van, a specially modified vehicle I had bought to accommodate his chair. I lowered the ramp. Nash rolled down onto the gravel. He looked at the wide wrap-around porch. He looked at the ramps that integrated seamlessly into the design. He looked at the barn where Leo was already working on restoring an old tractor. Home, he typed. Home, I agreed. We settled in. Life found a new rhythm. It wasn't the life we had planned, but it was a good life. I woke up early to tend the small vegetable garden I had planted. Nash spent his mornings on the porch, working on his computer. He had started an online consulting business using his engineering background to review blueprints and specs. He couldn't swing a hammer anymore, but he could still spot a structural flaw from a mile away. We hired a nurse, a kind woman named Maria, who came in during the day to help with physical therapy and meals. She treated Nash with respect, not pity. She laughed at his jokes even when they were typed out on a screen. One evening, about a year after we moved in, I was sitting on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of purple and orange. The air was cooling down, smelling of sagebrush and damp earth. I had a cup of coffee in my hand. Nash was next to me in his chair. We sat in silence for a long time, just watching the light fade. It was a comfortable silence. The kind of silence you can only have with someone who knows your whole story, who has seen you at your worst and still sits beside you. I looked at my son. He had filled out. His color was good. The scar on his head had faded to a thin white line. He looked older than his years, weathered by pain, but he looked at peace. He caught me looking. He smiled that crooked smile that still broke my heart a little and mended it at the same time. He raised his hand and tapped the screen. Thinking about her, the mechanical voice asked. I shook my head. No. I try not to. She is gone, Nash. She is in the past. He nodded. I am thinking about you, he typed. Me, I asked. Why? You saved me, Pops. You came for me. I looked out at the horizon. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a father who had been asleep at the wheel for too long. I should have known sooner, I said, my voice rough. I should have seen through the lies. I let 4 years go by, Nash. 4 years you were in that place. Nash reached out. His hand was steady now. He covered my hand with his. His grip was warm. You found me, he typed. That is what matters. Most people would have given up. Most people would have believed the lie. I squeezed his hand. I believed it because I was afraid, I admitted. I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid of rocking the boat. I let her push me into the corner because I thought I didn't have any fight left. Nash squeezed back. You found the fight, he typed. You burned the boat, Pops. I chuckled a dry sound. Yeah. I guess I did. I looked at the house behind us. It was small. It was modest. But it was ours. It was paid for. It was built with love. There were no secrets in these walls. There were no hidden agendas, no debts, no lies. We start over, I said, looking him in the eye. Right here. Right now. No more secrets, Nash. No more hiding things to protect each other. If we are in trouble, we say it. If we are hurting, we say it. No more secrets, he typed. Deal. Deal, I said. We sat there as the stars came out. The desert was vast and quiet around us. The coyotes started to yip in the distance. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted good. It tasted like freedom. I thought about the package Leo had handed me at the market. That battered shoebox full of pain. I had kept it. It was in the bottom drawer of my desk. Not as a souvenir of the trauma, but as a reminder. A reminder that the truth is heavy and it is ugly, and sometimes it smells like rot, but it is the only thing that can set you free. Brittany was in a cell staring at a concrete wall. She had wanted a legacy. She had wanted a dynasty. She had ended up with nothing but time to think about the man she underestimated. I looked at Nash. He was adjusting the blanket on his lap. He looked up and caught my eye. Movie night, he typed. I smiled. I stood up and stretched my old joints, popping. Yeah, son, movie night. What are we watching? Something with explosions, he typed, his eyes twinkling. And bad guys getting caught. I laughed. Sounds perfect. I walked behind his chair and released the brake. Let us go inside, I said. We rolled into the house we had built together, into the warmth and the light, leaving the darkness outside where it belonged. The door clicked shut behind us. A solid sound. A safe sound. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. I learned that silence is not a virtue when it covers up betrayal. For years, I thought keeping the peace was the only way to hold a family together, but that passivity almost cost me my son. We often accept less than we deserve because we fear loneliness, but being alone is far better than being with people who view you as a resource rather than a human being. True family protects you. They don't erase you. Never let anyone convince you that you are powerless or past your prime. It is never too late to take back your life, your dignity, and your voice. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. And tell me in the comments below, have you ever had to make a tough decision to cut a toxic family member out of your life? I read every single comment. Until next time.